Yo, Jerry.
Yo, what's up, twin?
Where did you get that knife?
Hey, relax, bro. I'm not gonna stab you, dude.
Okay.
Check out this sweet trick, though.
You know, there are a lot of people in the Forsaken community that only respect a handful of the survivors within the game. Mainly people like to focus on the 4 Sentinels and Elliot, because they think stunning the killer is overpowered, and they appreciate Elliot because he's the main healer of the game. And sure, you can play as all of these characters all of the time and still have fun and win, unless you're playing as motherfucking Cuck 1337. But I feel like people often forget the 3 other support characters. Believe it or not, Elliot isn't the only support character in the game. I know, it's insanely shocking. The issue is a lot of the community just thinks these other support characters are weak and don't really do anything major. They just think healing is the only type of support they'll ever need. Why most people prefer Elliot over every other support character is not only because Elliot is the main healer of the game, but he's also really easy to play even if he is defensively weak. Every other support character is a lot harder to play, and they are almost equally defensively weak. Elliot has his Rush Hour ability as a self-defense option, which is literally just a free speed boost at the press of a button. Every other support character doesn't have a self-sustain ability like this, but I feel like people don't realize 2 things about Rush Hour. One, being that every other support character has more HP than Elliot, which means they're better at self-sustain without abilities, and 2, being that Rush Hour really doesn't do that much. The killer can still easily catch up to the Elliot after the Rush Hour has ended, because after all, it's only speed 3 for 3 whole seconds. Anyways, enough talking about why these other support characters are so overlooked. Let's talk about what makes these underrated support characters so good. Also, 7 and 7 can be considered underrated. If you're drunk.
Shut your fucking mouth!
Taff is a survivor that I have really liked for a while now, and he's insanely fun to play, but people constantly hate on him and say he's the worst support in the game, which, as it stands right now, isn't true at all. To be fair, after the Noli update, the support characters are the most well-balanced group of characters in this entire game, and it's kind of hard to rank any of them just because they're all incredibly useful in their own scenarios. Taff used to be the worst support in the game, sure, but after the buffs he received in the Noli update that gave him the ability to place tripwire and trip mines much faster and allowed other survivors to see his traps, I feel like in a lot of scenarios he's the best support character. Taff, in the current state he's in, can heavily hinder how quickly the killer can actually kill people, and if people actually properly lure the killer to Taff's traps, there's a high chance that the killer will lose or be immensely affected and barely win. Anyways, let's look at Taff's kit. Taff is the only support character with 100 HP, which is an insane upside compared to every other support. Taff can't really use his abilities mid-chase, so he needs this extra HP to have good self-sustain. Taff's abilities are for setting up traps that slow down the killer to benefit the survivors in an active chase, requiring strategic placement and high-level thinking. Let's start with Taff's Q ability, Tripwire. Taff's Tripwire ability is really good. Slowness 2 for 4 whole seconds is a lot and can heavily impact a killer's performance in a chase. And sure, it only has 10 health and can be destroyed very easily, but it only has a cooldown of 25 seconds and you can have 3 put down at a time. A lot of people don't think this ability is very good, since the killer can just M1 or use any other ability that does damage. But since it has a very low cooldown and it can be placed down quite quickly, it's pretty effective if you're always using it when you're off cooldown. It also helps that you can have 3 tripwires at a time, and they have a lifetime of 80 seconds. Well, I assume it's 80 seconds because not even the wiki knows exactly how long it is for some reason. Next up we have Taff's E ability, Subspace Trip Mine. It will be your main method of stalling the killer. Your tripwire ability may be effective sometimes, but a lot of the time you're going to be relying on Subspace Trip Mines to consistently stall the killer out, because they're nowhere near as easy to counter. Subspace trip mines have a very large explosion radius, meaning that if the killer walks close enough to one, there's basically no chance that they can escape before it explodes. When the trip mine does explode, the killer will suffer helpless for 5 seconds and subspace 3 for 5 seconds as well. Subspaced is a really strong status effect that not only blinds the killer but makes their camera spin around at the same time. Subspaced can really mess up killers using shift lock, and most people playing as killer will be be using Shift Lock. Subspaced can also completely screw over Noli's Void Rush, but Noli is so easy to counter in so many ways this really isn't a big accomplishment. A lot of people that hate on Taff don't really ever play him properly. Even if he is map dependent, you are still encouraged to constantly be using your traps. You are basically never going to be doing generators as Taff, mainly because your cooldowns are so short that you can almost constantly use your abilities. And this is only further emphasized by the cooldown on Subspace Trip Mine being reduced when your Trip Mine explodes. Dakar is a character who recently got a lot of changes, to the point where it was basically a rework, and I think these changes severely helped Dakar. He was already pretty powerful before, but he was also way too map dependent, and I feel like these recent changes really helped with that issue. His abilities did get weaker with some aspects, like for example, Spawn Protection has a much shorter duration now, but it allows Dakar to have way more mobility while using it. Plasma Beam has less range and a longer cooldown, but again, he has more mobility while using it, and its hitbox is a lot wider now. Anyways, to start off talking about his kit, we have his passive ability called Levitation. The main purpose of Levitation is Dakar having no footstep noises whatsoever, which is supposed to make him harder for killers to find. But every killer except for Cool Kid can just use an ability to see through walls, so it's not like Levitation actually helps Dakar hide from the killer. Let's move on to Dakar's Q ability, Spawn Protection. It's really good at, well, protecting people. The beam lasts for 4 seconds, and during that amount of time, the survivor it's applied to has resistance 4, which means they aren't entirely invincible, but they are really resistant to damage. Dakar only has his movement speed decreased by 25% during this, which is really good considering he can sprint at the same time. But if you do see the killer sprinting at you just because you shielded the person they were chasing after, you should definitely cancel out the shield, because 25% is still 25%, even if you can sprint. Next up, we have Dakar's E ability, Plasma Beam. You're going to be using this ability a lot, because as long as you see the killer and you are in reasonable distance from them, specifically 75 studs, you are going to try and slow them down with this ability. With Plasma Beam, you can hit a survivor and the killer at the same time, so you can speed up one of your teammates and slow down the killer at the same time, which can really help in a lot of chases, but it is pretty rare. So just hitting the killer and giving them slowness 2 for 3 seconds is usually enough to give your teammates the upper hand in most chases. The reason why people usually say Dakar is weak is because he heavily relies on his teammates. Spawn Protection is an ability you need to use every time when you're playing as him, and if your teammate is clueless and they run towards you while you're shielding them, you are pretty much guaranteed to get hit by the killer, which is a turnoff for a lot of people. But when you actually have a good team and you're playing as Dakar, you'll see how strong he truly is. Alright, I think I saved the best one for the last. Builderman is one of the best survivors in this entire game, and I think he's the most underrated survivor on this list. Not only can Builderman severely help you while you're in an active chase like Dakar or Taff, but he can also heal you just like Elliot. Well, not exactly the same, but you know what I mean. Builderman's Q ability, Sentry, is one of the best abilities in the game for stalling out the killer. First of all, this thing gives slowness 2 to the killer constantly if they're in the sentry's range, and it takes 2 M1s to destroy. If your team actually knows where your sentry is, which is pretty easy because of the highlight it received in the Noli update, and if they actually lure the killer to it, they can easily stall out the killer for a long time. Slowness 2 is already a very large debuff, and the killer also has to land 2 M1s on it because it has 30 HP, which also takes a lot of time. Sentries are a very good thing when you're in an active chase and you need someone to help you. Matter of fact, Builderman himself doesn't even have to physically be there to stall out the killer, which makes this ability even more insane. Builderman's E ability, Dispenser, is really good for healing survivors who just escaped the chase and took some damage. A lot of people complain about Builderman's dispensers and how they take too long to heal, but these things have infinite lifetime if they aren't attacked by the killer, and they can heal multiple people at once. So if they were fast, it wouldn't be fair for the killer at all. It's best to build dispensers in more more hidden areas. I typically like to build my dispensers near generators unless the killer is Noli. Taking all of this into consideration, people often forget to appreciate how busted Builderman actually is. If your team knows what they're doing and actually lures the killer to your sentries, the killer will just get bullied. And not only that, but Builderman can also heal people, which means he's the best of both worlds in terms of support. Elliot is good for healing you outside of chases, meanwhile Taff and Dakar are really good for slowing down the killer during a chase, but Builderman can do both of these things, which is just insane. All in all, I can understand why these characters are often considered quote-unquote weak, because their effectiveness definitely depends a lot more on how good the other survivors are at the game. When you're playing as a Sentinel, you are usually considered independent, which is why people think they're quote-unquote overpowered. And when you're playing as Elliot, it can be pretty easy to simply just heal people without them needing to do specific things, like finding where your dispenser is. But when you have a competent team and they know how to work with these characters like Dakar or Taff, then you'll see how truly powerful these other support characters are. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments, and goodbye.
Using AI, what type, like what thing should I
Hold
use?
on, let's cut you off and talk about my penis.